Hello and welcome back to our YouTube channel. My name is Celia and I'm one of the speech and language therapists working in Ealing. And today we're going to be thinking about how you can support children and young people who stammer. So let's think about our workshop aims today. The first thing we're going to learn about today is learning about what stammering is. Then we're going to discuss some practical tips that you can use to support your child's communication skills, their speaking confidence with or without stammering, and also thinking about how you can support them to explore their thoughts and feelings. Then we're going to learn about whether your child may benefit from a referral for stammering support. And finally, I'm going to signpost you to further advice and support. So, as I mentioned the word communication in our workshop aims, let's explore what we mean by communication. So, we know that communication is a two-way process where messages go in and messages are sent out. And we can communicate in a number of different ways. So we can send and receive messages verbally, so by talking, or non-verbally. There are so many forms of non-verbal communication. We can use our facial expressions, gestures, signs, so maybe British Sign Language, Makaton, sign-supported English. There are so many signing systems. Using eye contact or looking towards someone. There are so many forms of non-verbal communication, and both talking, using verbal communication, and non-verbal communication make up communication. So let's think about what stammering is. Stammering, it's a bit like an iceberg. You can only see what's going on the surface. So there's so much more going on underneath. So as we can see in our picture here, if we were looking above sea level, we would only be able to see the very tip of the iceberg. We wouldn't be able to see what's going on underneath, which seems to be most of the iceberg. So let's explore what we can see above sea level. Some things that we can see include stammering behaviours, so interruptions in the flow of speech, and also tension when the person who stammers is trying to get their words out. So now I'd like to invite you to pause this video and think about what stammering sounds like and what it looks like. Okay, I hope you've had a chance to pause the video there and to have a think about what stammering looks like and what it sounds like. Let's explore this together. So, people who stammer may repeat the whole word. So they might say during a moment of stammering, and, then I left. Or they might repeat the single sound. So they might say something like, come here. During a moment of stammering, someone who stammers may experience prolongations. So they might say something like, sometimes I go. Or they might experience a moment of blocking. So it might look and sound something like this. And then I left. So the mouth is open in a position that seems like the person is ready to speak, but no sound comes out for a moment. Okay, so let's come back to our iceberg and think about what else we can see above sea level. So what else can we see on the surface? So we can also see something called secondary behaviours. So this is to say something that someone who stammers may do during a moment of stammering. So this could be something like facial tension, maybe an extra body movement that someone does to try and push the word out. They may avoid eye contact if this is something that they typically are comfortable with giving. Or you might notice that the person who stammers breathing pattern is disrupted. So, for example, they may hold their breath while speaking, or they might take in a big, deep breath before speaking. Okay, so now let's think about what is going on below the surface. So we know that there are lots of feelings associated with stammering. So the person who stammers may feel anxious, nervous, embarrassed, or is ashamed about their stammer. They might also experience something called negative automatic thoughts during moments of stammering or after a moment of stammering, where they might think, everyone's looking at me, I can't speak. And this can affect their self-esteem and speaking confidence. Some people who stammer may also experience some avoidance behaviours. So we know that sometimes children, young people, or people who stammer adopt strategies to try and minimise or hide their stammer. So, for example, they might avoid or change using certain words. So you might notice that your child during or after a moment of stammering might say something like, oh, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Or maybe they'll switch one word to another word during a moment of stammering, or if they anticipate stammering. So they might start a sentence by saying, I played with my my family on Saturday. Because they were experienced that moment of stammering on a particular word, they swapped it out for a word or a phrase that means something similar. Okay. And you might also notice that the person who stammers avoids certain situations. So, for example, they might avoid speaking in assembly or asking questions during class. And we know that some children or young people or people who stammer become so adept and so good at hiding their stammer that they actually appear as if they don't have a stammer, or to people who don't know them very well, they might appear very quiet. But we know that there is so much more going on below the surface of our iceberg. There's so much that we can't see as the observer. Okay, so now I'd quite like us to do a quiz. I'm going to put up some statements on our screen, and I'm going to ask you if these statements are true or are they false. So you're more than welcome to pause the screen to read the statement. I will read it out for you, but maybe have a pause and think about this statement and whether it's true or false. Okay, so is this true or false? Between 2 to 5 years old is the most common time for children to start stammering. Okay, I hope you've had a chance to think about that. The answer is true. We know that between around the ages of 2 and 5 years old is the most common time for children to start stammering. This is due to this period being a rapid a time in a child's life where they are rapidly developing speech and language skills. Okay. Let's think about another statement. Is this true or false? 8% of children at some point in their lives stammer. Okay. This statement is true. We know that around 8% of children stammer at some point in their lives, and we know that around 1% of adults stammer. Okay, let's have a look at another statement. So, true or false? More girls stammer than boys. Okay, let's say the answer. More girls stammer than boys. This is false. We know that the same number of boys and girls stammer under the age of 5, but more boys stammer than girls into school age and then into adulthood. So it's about the same in early years, but after early years, more boys stammer than girls. Okay, true or false? Stammering is more common in families who speak more than one language. Okay, let's check out the answer. So we know that this is false. We know that bilingual speakers, or people who speak more than one language, are no more likely to stammer than a monolingual speaker. This is to say, someone who only speaks one language. And we know that stammering occurs across all socio-economic groups and backgrounds. Okay, let's look at our final statement. So, true or false? There is a cure for stammering. This is false. There is no cure for stammering. Okay, so let's think about what we learnt during that quiz. So we learnt that stammering is more common in children. Okay, so let's think about what we learnt during that quiz. We learnt that stammering is common in children, particularly when their language is developing really quickly. So during those early years stages of around 2.5 to 5 years old. And we know that many children will stop stammering without the need of any support from a speech and language therapist. However, we know that some children and young people and people who stammer benefit from some additional support from a speech and language therapist. Now let's explore the Palin model together. The Palin model was developed at the Michael Palin Centre, which is based in London. The Palin model places the child or young person who stammers and their brain at the centre, reflecting what is known about the genetic and neurophysiological factors which underpin developmental stammering. When we talk about neurophysiological factors, we're referring to the nervous system, which includes the brain and how these work. The child is at the centre of the triangle. Each point of the triangle represents speech motor, language and communication, and psychological, which is to say feelings and emotions. The model helps us to include each person's unique strengths and vulnerabilities in each of these areas, which may be relevant to the development and impact of their stammer. The circle surrounding the triangle represents the child or young person environment, so their home, school, and social world. This helps us to consider how unique environmental factors may interact with the psychological, speech, motor, physiological, and language and communication factors to influence their experience of stammering. The Palin model is not a causal model. Instead, we use it to help us to understand the number of factors that underpin stammering. Speech and language therapists may use this model during their assessment to help us to highlight the areas which are relevant for each individual child or young person. The model also helps us to make a therapy plan and to explain therapy to the child or young person who stammers and their families in a way that is personal to them. This helps families and parents and carers to reduce the feelings of guilt and anxiety related to stammering and build an open, collaborative relationship built on the shared understanding of stammering and of the child or young person's experiences. Let's explore the Palin model a bit further together. So at the top of our tier is language and communication. We have our psychological factors, so our feelings and our emotions, and speech motor factors. So this child or person is operating with all of these different elements going on at the same time for them. So this is happening all in the context of their environment. So these are the environment is represented by the rings around the child and the triangle around them. So for a child or young person, the environment may be home and school. Okay, so let's unpick this model a little bit together. So let's start with physiological factors. So we know that genetics make you predisposed to stammering, but genetics doesn't account for all stammering. There is strong evidence for a genetic component. So we know that around 30 to 60% of people who stammer have a family history of stammering. And we know that children who are adopted by parents who stammer are no more likely to stammer than the rest of the population. So we know that it's not copied. At onset, the ratio of girls versus boys who stammer is almost even. So more girls are more likely to stop stammering than boys once they reach school age. So we know, as we explored earlier, more boys tend to stammer after the early years compared to girls. We know that the ratio is about 4 boys for every 1 girl. And there's research to show that there are structural and functional differences in the brain in people who stammer. So neuroplasticity means that this can change, especially in younger children. Okay, now let's think about speech motor factors. So there's some evidence to suggest that the speech motor system, so the part of our bodies that we use for speech are less well developed in children who stammer. So this means that people who stammer tend to be slower at making movements involved in speaking. Okay. Now let's think about language and communication factors. So stammering often begins when the child is experiencing rapid bursts of language development. So again, during that stage of around 2 years old to 5 years old. And stammering is more likely to occur at the start of words and when the person is using longer or more complex words. And we know that a stammer can hide or mask language difficulties. So during a speech and language assessment, the therapist will often assess the child's language skills to see the relationship and influence of language on the child's ability to communicate. We also know that speaking more than one language does not increase the likelihood of a development or the continuation of a stammer. However, children who speak more than one language may experience typical disfluencies due to managing 2 languages. So, for example, when they're switching from one language to another, they may experience some moments of stammering. However, we shouldn't stop them from doing this, from switching between the 2 languages, as it's totally natural. And it's important that the child uses whatever language or whichever language they are comfortable with using to express themselves. So it's really important to keep your home language alive. Okay, and we know that stammering may affect one or more or both languages. Therefore, a child may stammer more in one language because they're trying to express themselves in a fuller way or in a more complex way, or a child may stammer more in one language because they're less proficient or less confident in that language and they're finding it really difficult to express themselves. It's really important to remember that bilingualism, or speaking more than one language, is a good thing. It's an asset. And it's important that the child can express themselves within their family. Okay, let's think about psychological factors. So here we're going to explore what's going on with the child's emotions, their reactions, their experiences, and their feelings. So we're going to think about children's temperament or their nature, their awareness of stammering, and their own reactions to moments of stammering. So we know that there's research that shows that children who stammer can react more quickly and to a greater degree than children who don't stammer. And children who stammer can also find it more difficult to calm themselves down and to regulate their emotions. Children who stammer can also demonstrate perfectionist tendencies and can become upset about making errors with their speech. We also know that there are higher rates of anxiety in school-age children and social anxiety in teenagers and adults who stammer. There are also higher levels of separation anxiety in 8 to 12-year-olds compared to the non-stammering population in the same age group. So we know that there are higher levels of anxiety here. The psychological factors that we've discussed, so for example, temperament or the child's nature, their awareness of stammering and anxiety does not apply to every child who stammers. Okay, now let's explore the rings that are around our child on our diagram. So these are the environmental factors. So here we're thinking about the impact that stammering has on adults. So there are studies to show that parents feel anxious, worried, frustrated, helpless, overwhelmed, and guilty around their child having a stammer. They worry about the future and that it will prevent their child from reaching their full potential. Parents often report a lack of confidence in responding to moments of stammering, and some parents often don't know whether to acknowledge the moments of stammering, or to refer to the stammer and to talk about it openly. And hopefully today we'll be able to help you to feel more confident to support your child or young person during moments of stammering. We know that parents need to be involved in therapy to support their child, but they also need to receive support themselves. So parents need to have a time and a place to discuss their feelings and emotions about stammering. If we think about the communication environment, there is no evidence of different interaction styles of parents of children who stammer and children who don't stammer. So we don't work with parents because we need to change something they are doing or something that they've done wrong, or because their interaction style has a role in their child beginning to stammer. The most important thing to know is that research shows us that parents do not cause their child to stammer. Let's think about demands and capacities. So we know that stammering occurs more when there is a higher demand placed on the child to talk, and the child doesn't have the capacity or maybe the ability to meet these demands. So, for example, perhaps if an adult or someone else is asking the child who stammers lots and lots and lots of questions, and they're quite high level questions, and perhaps the child doesn't have the language to answer these questions yet, or maybe they don't have enough time to process the questions that are being asked really quickly. This can mean that there is a lack of balance between their capacities, so the skills that they have, and the demands that are being placed on them. So we can think of this as a bit of a seesaw. So the demands are really, really high, but their capacity isn't quite matching the demand yet. And we know that during these sorts of situations, there can be more moments of stammering. Okay, so we know that demands are either placed on the child by others around them or by the child themselves. And when we're thinking about how we can help the child or young person in this situation, we can think about some goals that can help us. So our first goal would be to reduce demands on the child's system. And our second goal could be to educate everyone around us about stammering and to support the child to be confident and competent communicators. So we're going to explore ways that we can achieve these goals together and think about how we can help children and young people who stammer to achieve these goals. Okay, so far we have thought about and learnt about what stammering is. Next, we're going to think about some practical tips that you can use to support your child's communication skills, their speaking confidence with or without stammering, and also think about their thoughts and feelings associated with stammering. Okay, so I'm going to include a link to a video that was produced by the Michael Palin Centre. They are based in London, and they also produced the Palin Model that we explored together earlier. This video is really, really helpful to watch, as it's produced by the Michael Palin Centre, but they are interviewing children and young people who stammer. And it is aimed at teachers, but it's really helpful for parents and carers to watch as well. So I would really recommend watching this video. It's called Wait, 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 I'm Not Finished Yet. And I'm going to put the link to the video in the description box below, so you can have a look there and maybe pause this video, have a watch, and come back to us when you're ready. Welcome back to the workshop. I hope you had a chance to watch the Wait, 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 I'm Not Finished Yet video by the Michael Palin Centre. Let's think about how we can help children and young people who stammer. So the first thing we can do to help is by being open about stammering. And by this, I mean talking about stammering and acknowledging stammering, normalizing stammering, validating it, and reassuring the child or young person during a moment of stammering or after a moment of stammering. So we know that some older children who stammer say they thought that their stammer was something to be shameful of, and something that they had to hide from everybody, as no one around them would acknowledge their stammer. There is no evidence to say that drawing a child's attention to their stammer will make it worse. In fact, now we think the opposite. It's actually really helpful to acknowledge moments of stammering. So you can do this by saying, after a moment of stammering, perhaps, I can see that that word was tricky for you. So there, you're just acknowledging that it happened. Okay. We can also try and normalize it by saying things like, oh, we all get a bit stuck with our words sometimes, and just sort of modeling that it's okay. We also, as adults, have moments of where talking is really tricky. We can also try and validate the child or young person's feelings around stammering. So you can say something like, it feels annoying when our words don't come out, doesn't it? So we know that children who stammer or young people who stammer will feel many emotions around their stammer. So they might experience frustration, happiness, or annoyance when talking. And when we validate these feelings, we're using it as an opportunity to talk about their stammer. And we know that that can help with exploring and validating feelings. We also want to make sure that we're reassuring the child or young person when they're communicating. So you can do this by saying something really simple like, you're doing brilliantly, I'm listening, keep going. There, we're reassuring the child or young person that regardless of whether they stammer or not, we are listening to what they're saying, not how they're saying it. Okay, let's think of some other ways that we can help the child or young person who stammers. So we can also reduce our rate of speech. So we know that quick conversations increase pressure on a child who stammers, and this can make it more difficult for them to communicate. And we may think that if we slow down, then our child will also slow down and speak a bit less quick. But we know that this is not the case. We know that slowing down our own rate of speech actually gives the child or young person more time to process what we're talking, and it makes it easier for them to follow what we're saying, and it helps them to feel less rushed. So this can be more helpful than telling a child or young person to slow down, start again, or to take a breath. Because when we do that, the child or young person might forget what they were going to say. They might think, oh, I'm not going to bother telling that person what I was going to say because they're more concerned about how I'm saying it. Or when we tell them to slow down and take a deep breath, that might actually increase tension, because when we take a deep breath, we actually increase our bodily tension. Okay. Another way that we can help children or young people who stammer is by trying to avoid asking lots and lots of questions. So thinking back to that demands and capacities model, we know that when we ask lots and lots of questions, this can make the child feel like they're being tested. And often when we ask questions, we don't always give the other person that much time to reply. So we can try and balance out our questions with comments. So as we can see on our little hand model here, for every one question that you ask, you can try and make 4 comments related to the question that you're asking or to whatever the child is interested in. This is especially helpful with younger children. So I'm not saying get rid of questions completely, because that is totally impossible. And especially for older children and young people, we need to ask questions. That's how we communicate. And we want to make sure that when we do ask questions, we're slowing down our rate of speech, and we're also giving the child or young person plenty of time to process what we've said, and also to think of a reply and to reply to us. And also, it's okay not to speak. We know that giving our child or young person time to think and silence is actually really helpful for them, because this is thinking time. Silence is golden, because that's when we do all our thinking. Okay, let's continue to think about ways that we can help. We can also think about maybe simplifying our language. We know that when we use simple language, it makes it easier for a child to understand you and to understand what you're saying. It also helps them to use words and sentences that they feel more comfortable with. Okay, so a child who stammers may stammer more when they're trying to say complicated words or longer words or sentences, because they are longer. Okay. Another way that you can help is by avoiding guessing words or finishing off the child's sentence. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the chance to finish off what they're trying to say, and making sure that even if they're experiencing a moment of stammering, we are waiting patiently for them to finish their sentence. This can be really frustrating for a child or young person if we butt in and finish off their sentence, because we'll probably get it wrong. And we want to give that person the time and the chance to finish saying what they'd like to say. So we want to make sure that we're once again listening to what the person who stammers is saying, not how they say it. And that way we can reduce frustration, because if we're not finishing off the child or young person's sentence, we're not going to get it wrong. We're just going to listen to what they're saying. Okay. Another way that you can help is by keeping consistent routines. So try to introduce routine and organisation into your family's life so that your child does not feel as though everyone in the home is always rushing. So be aware that at times a child or young person may experience more moments of stammering, particularly if they're unwell, excited, tired, or anxious. You can try and support them and support their communication by ensuring that they have a good bed routine in place, and also trying to discourage screen time use before bed, because we know that exposure to artificial blue light can suppress the release of the body's sleep-inducing hormone melatonin. In turn, this can interfere with the body's natural internal clock that signals our brain when it's time to go to sleep and time to wake up. However, audiobooks are fine as there's no screen involved and there's no artificial light involved. Let's continue to think about how we can help a child or young person who stammers. You can support them by building their confidence and their resilience. So we can do this by thinking about positive characteristics that a child may have. So, for example, they may be kind, funny, helpful, whatever you might think of. And we can do this by giving something called specific praise. So basically, this is where we describe what we saw our child do, or maybe something that they tried to do, and then we add a praise word. So this is an adjective or a describing word that we can associate with that action. So let's look at some examples here. We can maybe say something like, "Oh, I noticed that you helped me put the shopping away. That was really helpful." What I did there is I identified the action, so putting the shopping away, and then I added an all-encompassing descriptive word at the end. So I said that they were really helpful. And there are lots of different forms of descriptive praise that we can use. So instead of giving quite generic praise that I'm sure we give throughout the day, that's really nice to hear, we want to give some more descriptive praise. And it's really important that it's descriptive, because if we do this consistently and often, we know that children will start to sort of fill in the gaps for themselves, and they will self-praise, which means that their self-esteem will continue to grow and develop, and they will become more confident, and also in turn more confident communicators. So let's look at some examples together. So for younger children, instead of saying things like "good girl, well done," we might make that praise a bit more descriptive by saying something like, "You were playing with your brother and you gave him the toy. Great sharing." Or simply just, "Great sharing." Or you might say something like, "Ah, great dressing yourself," and using that really specific praise. For older children and young people, you might say something like, "You worked really hard to finish your homework all by yourself. You're very independent." Instead of saying something like, "Good try." Instead of "nice work," you might say something like, "I noticed that you put the shopping away. You're very helpful." So that example again, trying to describe what we saw and then add a lovely descriptive praise word at the end. And we want to make sure that we notice all the little things. So it could be something as simple as they tucked their chair in after dinner, something as small as that, or even just a bit of encouragement around the effort that they've put into something. Even if it didn't quite go to plan, at least they tried really hard to do it. Okay. We can also help children and young people who stammer by introducing something called special time. So special time is time where you and your child play together, one without any external distractions. So no siblings, no pets, no other parent if there's another parent or carer, just you and your child one-on-one for 5 to 10 minutes per day. Also, during this one-on-one time, there is no screens allowed. So there are no screens allowed. So we can't have the TV on in the background or the phone on loud on the side. We just want to make sure that it's one-on-one quality time for 5 minutes a day without any distractions. And during this time, we want to make sure that you let the child pick whatever they want to play with, of course, as long as it's not on a screen. And we want to make sure that they're leading the play. So they've picked the activity, and for those 5 to 10 minutes, they are leading the activity. Okay. And we want you to focus on your child's interaction and on your communication strategy in that moment. So the child isn't really going to change anything about how they play or how they interact with you. It's the adult who will make some adjustments and use some strategies. So, for example, you might say, during this special time, I'm going to focus on asking less questions, or I'm going to slow down my own rate of speech. And then afterwards, you can reflect on whether that made any difference in terms of your child's communication and their confidence in communicating. Also, there is no pressure to talk. It's absolutely fine to just have that space and to enjoy special time together. We also think about perhaps older children during special time might not want to call special time. So maybe you can work together to think about, okay, what should we call our special time? Some children like to call special time their first name plus time. So for me, my special time would be called Celia time. So it's up to the child. You can think about together, maybe support them in thinking of a new name if they feel like special time isn't right for them. But the concept stays the same. Okay. Now let's think a little bit more about children who speak more than one language. And this is something that we touched on earlier in the workshop. But just to come back to this, we know that bilingualism, or speaking more than one language, is an advantage. And we know that mixing words from different languages is okay. This is something called code switching. And we know that it's totally okay for children, young people, and adults to do this. And we know that you can do all of these strategies and all of these things in your home language. It doesn't have to be in English. We want to make sure that parents and carers are using the language that they're most confident in speaking in. Okay, so let's explore what we've covered so far in our workshop. The first thing we learned about is what stammering is. And then we discussed some practical tips that you can use to support your child's communication skills, their speaking confidence with or without stammering, and also their thoughts and feelings associated with stammering. Now let's learn about whether your child may benefit from a referral for stammering support. And today I'm going to specifically talk about the referral process in Ealing. The referral process in Ealing is based on the current evidence base that suggests that children aged 7 or above develop a greater awareness of the impact of their stammer, and this plays more of an active part in therapy and the decision making, whereas for under sevens, the therapy is indirect and aims to make environmental and interaction changes to support the child's speaking confidence. So for children under the age of 7, we accept referrals for any child who stammers under the age of 7, and this is because we're using that non-direct approach, so changing making adaptations in their environment or in the interaction strategies that we use with the child. And this aims to support their communication skill development, their speaking confidence, and their well-being at this age. For over 7s, it's a little bit different. So we only accept referrals if there is evidence of impact of the stammer on these 3 areas. So participation. So for example, maybe your child is no longer speaking during class or putting their hand up. In their peer relationships, so maybe they're being less sociable due to their stammer, and also affecting their general well-being. So this is because the reason that we need evidence of impact in these areas is because children over the age of 7 are a big part of the therapy process. So we need them to be actively engaged and participating, reflecting in the sessions, and also being able to evaluate their own communication skills, testing listeners' reactions, addressing their thoughts and feelings associated with stammering, as well as carrying out confidence building activities during and between sessions. So they have to be an active participant in the therapy. So this is why the referral process is different compared to under 7s and over 7s. So if you feel that your child would benefit from a referral, you can speak to your child's nursery or their school, to your GP, or reach out to the speech and language therapy team. And I will put our contact details below for our advice line. Okay, so let's think about the aims of assessment. So during an assessment, the aim that the speech and language therapist will have is to gather information about your family's background, medical history, thoughts and feelings associated with stammering, and also associating factors. So exploring that Palin model that we looked at earlier. So kind of unpicking each factor and having a look there. So the reason that we do this is to work with you and your child to formulate a plan for next steps and to give you specific advice for how you can support your child while they wait for therapy. Now let's think about the aims of stammering support. So the main aims for therapy and stammering support are to support speaking confidence with or without stammering, to help children and families understand stammering, and also to make environmental changes to support speaking confidence. And we want to think about what our role is as the speech and language therapist. So we can't make the stammer go away, but we can do lots of things to support your child or young person who stammers and your family. So as therapists, we aim to encourage positive interactions with or without stammering. We want to give you information about stammering and explain how to explain this to others. And we also want to help the child or young person learn tips or strategies to decrease struggle when they're experiencing moments of stammering. We also want to help the child or young person become more confident communicators. And finally, we want to help the child manage their feelings associated with stammering. If your child or young person's stammer is having a big impact on them, please reach out. So please talk to someone. So you can talk to lots of different people. You can either talk to your child's school or their nursery setting, their health visitor, your child's GP, or even your local speech and language therapist. So I will, in a moment, flag up our advice line poster, and I will include the contact details for our advice line in the description box below as well. It's really, really important to reach out and talk to someone if you have any concerns or if your child is expressing any concerns. Okay, so let's come back to our workshop aims. We've learned about what stammering is. We've discussed lots of practical tips that you can use to support your child's communication skills, their speaking confidence with or without stammering, and also how to explore their thoughts and feelings around stammering. We've also learned about whether your child may benefit from a referral for stammering support, and we've explored the referral process in Ealing. Now I'm going to signpost you to some further advice and support that you can access. We also have lots and lots of useful websites and campaigns that we've collated and put together onto this slide. Organisations such as Stammer and the Michael Palin Centre have lots of fantastic resources that you can access on their website. So, for example, the Wait, I'm Not Finished video that was produced by the Michael Palin Centre. There's a stammering tap video that some families find really, really helpful. And there are lots of other websites that I will leave you to explore in your own time. There are also support groups and helplines run by Stammer and by the Michael Palin Centre. So Stammer have a helpline, a web chat and an email address that you can reach out to. They also offer a range of online and in-person support groups that you can explore on their website. The Michael Palin Centre also has an advice line that you can contact. You can contact them as a parent or carer, or if you're an older young person, you can give them a call yourself, and someone can speak to you from the Michael Palin Centre. Okay, so we have lots and lots of videos on our YouTube channel. If you're looking for more information, or even if you're looking outside of stammering and on other, or looking for other areas that you would like some support in, such as speech or understanding autism or supporting autistic children to communicate, you can have a look at our YouTube channel and explore this. So now we've reached the end of our workshop. So thank you so much for coming today and for watching the video. I hope that you have learned some useful tips that will be helpful when supporting your child or young person who stammers. Don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to our channel for more useful content, and to share it with others who may benefit from this information. Again, if you have any questions, you live or work in Ealing, you can contact us via our advice line. Scroll down below and you will find our contact details underneath this video. Thank you and goodbye.